Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jennifer Griffith, and I work at the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association. And I've got the screen up showing our website, which is soon to be obsolete, but it's not quite. NMOA will be launching a new website within the next few weeks. But I wanted everybody just to be able to read a little bit about what NMOA is. We're an interstate association of the waste programs in the Northeast. The 6 New England states and New York and New Jersey work together. And we have been focused on construction and demolition waste for a long time. It makes up it's at least half of the waste that gets disposed. It's about equal in weight as a municipal solid waste. So NMOA has had a long-standing focus on construction and demolition waste, and one of the problem components of that waste stream is gypsum wallboard. So we are really focused on trying to promote awareness of the issue and then solutions. So we have the webinar today to talk more about the problems created by gypsum wallboard in the waste stream and current efforts on trying to divert and recycle that waste stream. And then that's today. We've got 4 great presenters. And then we're having another webinar in 2 weeks on the 24th. So it's a Tuesday. And that is going to be talking more about solutions. We'll have a presenter from the construction industry about the feasibility of separating out the wallboard, and some researchers that are trying to develop some materials from the waste gypsum, and then also the Gypsum Wallboard Manufacturers Association will all be presenting. That's on the 24th. So NMOA's website I'm showing here. But also we are partnered with our sister association, which is the Northeast Recycling Council. They're focused more on recycling, and also include a couple of 3 states that are not members of NMOA. So that's Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware. So, but NERC's website is current, and I'm just going to show you, this is their homepage, nerc.org, but then also if you went under events and to webinars, here is the information about today's webinar, but also the one in 2 weeks, and you can register. They've got a great link just to register for that. And if you keep scrolling down, this is also where the presentations from today's webinar will be posted, as well as links to the presentation PDFs. We are recording this, and so this will come up as a past presentation on NERC's website. So if people want to learn more about NERC, this is their website, and then I had showed you the website from NMOA earlier. So let's see, logistics for this webinar. We've got a lot of people joining us, which is great. So thank you, everybody. But there's too many people for people to ask questions themselves. So you're going to have to type them in. So in the questions in your control panel, which nobody else sees, it's your panel, and you can move it around, or if you click on that red arrow at the top, it will sort of disappear it. But if you do want to ask a question, you're going to have to type it in. It should be a question area of your control panel that will, where you can type in questions, and I'll be trying to monitor the questions. We'll do a couple questions after each presentation, and then hopefully we'll have a good chunk of time at the end to have, a good question and answer session with all the presenters. So I think that's it for logistics. So again, welcome everybody. And I am going to, let's see here, I got too many things going on here. Start changing the presenter over to our first presenter. who's going to talk about issues at landfills and at construction and demolition recycling facilities that take in, that receive this waste. It's just part of the waste stream. So our first presenter is Rick Watson. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Delaware Solid Waste Authority, which is a quasi-governmental waste authority that services Delaware, the state of Delaware. He's had that position since 2014. Rick received a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Clarkson University and a Master's with Civil Engineering from the University of Delaware. He's a professional engineer and a board-certified environmental engineer with the American Academy of Environmental Engineers and Scientists. Rick joined the Delaware Solid Waste Authority in 1981 as a project engineer and for its first double-lined landfill construction. Since then, he's been involved in numerous landfill and recycling projects. So with that, I'm going to turn off my camera and Rick will take it away.
Hello, thank you. I'll try to put my slideshow up. And there we go. Thank you, Jennifer. Yes. Again, I'm Rick Watson with the Delaware Solid Waste Authority for a little over 41 years. And I'm going to describe today our facilities that receive the C&D material and what we do with it, problems that it's created, and how we deal with it. Just a brief explanation. Delaware Solid Waste Authority is a statewide authority for the big state of Delaware. We have 3 landfills and 3 transfer stations, and we receive all the MSW and most of the C&D that's in the state. Just to give you an idea, our state has a population of about 1 million people right now. So, what is gypsum wallboard? Well, it's commonly known as drywall. It's approximately 90% gypsum encased in about 10% paper. And gypsum is a mineral classification as a sulfate. And chemical formula there is hydrated calcium sulfate. So how much comes to our landfills? Well, as I had mentioned before, we get 3 landfills, of which the Southern Solid Waste Management Center has the most C&D material come to it in relation to the others. So I thought I'd present the information regarding that particular landfill. And it serves the southern part of the state of Delaware. The total waste we received in calendar year 21 was 325,850 tons. Of that, C&D comprised about 108,710 tons. So almost a third, roughly, of the material that we receive at that facility is C&D material. The other 2 landfills in the northern part of the state, they receive anywhere between 10 to 15% C&D material. So that's why I chose this one. And this is the site that has posed us the most issues. So then in 2015, we conducted a waste characterization study of just the C&D material coming to this particular landfill. And the result of that study identified that the gypsum content of C&D was about 7%, which would then translate into about 7,610 tons in a particular year. We were only able to recover approximately 728 tons, which is about a little less than 10%. And I will go into further slides to describe what we do. But first, how does it arrive at our landfill down at the southern landfill? Well, we have 2 transfer stations in the southern part of the state, and they receive clean gypsum. They have drop-off spots for just clean gypsum wallboard, and then it's put into transfer trailers, and the trailers come to our southern landfill, where the majority of it is accumulated in one place to make it more efficient for shipping. And then the clean gypsum coming to our landfill directly is unloaded, as you see in the center picture. We will describe that a little bit more. Majority of it comes mixed in with the C&D loads, and which is just emptied directly on our landfill, as you see in the photograph on the right. So problems that it creates at landfills. Well, I'm saying that a minor problem is that it takes up valuable landfill space. In the big picture of things, that's a real problem. We don't want to be wasting our landfill space for something that could be recycled. But the major problems I've identified here is that gypsum in the landfill environment produces hydrogen sulfide gas, which is toxic, flammable, corrosive, and odorous. And what I mean by landfill environment is, again, it's landfilled with MSW. And as you can see in the picture, it's very messy and you've got all kinds of things in there. And the landfill environment, you've got, it's a lot of moisture. You know, when you're out in the open there, it rains from time to time and that rainwater just percolates down into the waste. You also have anaerobic conditions within the landfill. You have a lot of organic material. MSW contains a lot of organics, including food waste. And then you have bacteria. And the combination of all those things produces landfill gas. And the landfill gas has hydrogen sulfide gas within it. And as it says here, it's toxic, it's flammable, corrosive, and odorous. So what would you do about that? Well, if you don't effectively collect landfill gas, you can have hazardous working conditions. And you need to make sure that your operators are having personal monitors on them so that they know if they're in a dangerous situation. There's damage to infrastructure. Infrastructure includes leachate collection, landfill gas collection, manholes, and other equipment that's used to collect and treat it. And then finally, there's nuisance odors. Hydrogen sulfide, it smells like rotten eggs, not very pleasant, and it's not only a nuisance odor for the people that are operating the landfill, but also for our neighbors. And it's very odorous at very low concentrations. And it can travel very far under the right weather conditions. So but another important thing is that if you're effectively actually collecting the landfill gas to treat it, it can still cause problems because that collected landfill gas with the hydrogen sulfide in it can damage landfill gas to electric generators. At this particular site, we have 5 generators that collect landfill gas, which is mostly methane and carbon dioxide, but also has trace amounts of hydrogen sulfide too. And it can cause damage to those generators. And then in addition, we've got Title V air permits that could be violated if we didn't collect and treat it properly. So how have we dealt with these problems? Well, currently we have a system where we don't charge for clean, separate loads of gypsum at our transfer stations or at our landfills. We're trying to encourage the easiest method to keep it separate is the closer you get to the source of it. So we've been in contact with all of our customers that have mixed loads that have C&D in it to inform them that, hey, take advantage of our system here where it's, if you bring it in separately, we don't charge. If you bring it in mixed, you're paying $75 a ton. And we also been in contact with local builders associations to make sure that they get the word out to their people that are in this business to have their loads taken separately. And it can be, if it's well planned, you can have, when you're doing the work of home building, it would make sense, in our opinion, to keep it separate. And also, the other thing that's encouraged is people to build to LEED standards, and especially the businesses. Once we do that, and as you can see in the pictures, how a typical clean load is unloaded, and they're usually small loads, as you see there. And then we accumulate a big pile, and then once we've got enough in a pile, we have our front end loader in the lower picture that loads it into a transfer trailer, and then that transfer trailer takes it for recycling up to USA Gypsum in Pennsylvania. And just to show, for our particular situation, they charge us at the door a recycling fee of $17, our transportation fee and fuel surcharge. So the total cost for that is $55.71 a ton for us. And also to give you an idea, their facility is located in Pennsylvania. We're in southern Delaware. It's about 150 miles one way for that trip. To, that's why the transportation fee is on the high side. How else do we deal with problems? Well, we need to try our best to accelerate the collection of landfill gas, which of course contains hydrogen sulfide. And by that I mean, typical landfill, you're going to be generating landfill gas anyways. When your municipal solid waste is decomposing, it produces it. And so accelerating it is that as soon as it's physically possible to install a landfill gas collection well, that is what we try to do. But you need to have a certain amount of waste in place to make it effective. Because if you put in a gas system and start drawing a vacuum on it too soon, too strong, you're going to draw in oxygen into the landfill. And that's a dangerous situation, which could cause a landfill fire internally. So you just have to make sure that you've got a depth, typically about 20 feet of waste and soil, before you can effectively draw landfill gas without drawing oxygen from the outside air into the landfill. The other thing here is that we have a treatment system. Once we collect that landfill gas, which contains the hydrogen sulfide, there's so much of it that it's going to damage the engines and also cause a problem of excess air emissions from sulfate. We use a media, and the media is that we've tried to use in 2017 cost us $1.4 million, just the cost of the media, which is an absorbent to remove the hydrogen sulfide. And back in 2017, we also had a higher concentration of hydrogen sulfide in our landfill gas, over 2,000 parts per million. And by our effort to separate out even only that 10% has helped, and because it's reduced the concentration down to right around 1,100 parts per million from that 2,000. And then we've also tried different media, treatment media, and we found one that's a lot more effective and a lot less expensive. So the combination of those two factors have reduced our media costs to $300,000 a year, which still is pretty substantial. In the top picture, what we have is our collection system, where we've got 2 flares, and in the background, we've got a building that has 5 landfill gas to electric engines, which we collect on the order of 2,000 standard cubic feet per minute of landfill gas. And we have 5 generators that could, if they're running full tilt, would have 5 megawatts of power generated, which we sell. Well, actually, we have a partnership with a company called Amoresco, and they're the owner operator of that equipment. And the electric is sold there, and we have an agreement, a cost sharing agreement with them for that. And next slide. How much C&D comes to a C&D processing facility? There's a processing facility in northern Delaware. It's run by a company called Revolution Recovery, and they partnered with us. We had an abandoned building on a waste processing site up there, and asked for proposals for recycling and Revolution Recovery came in with a C&D processing proposal. And we partnered with them beginning in 2012. And here's some most recent data from 2019 through present. You can see they process over 125,000 tons per year. When they've done an evaluation of their gypsum content within their C&D tons, you can see they have roughly 5%. And since they have a processing system with a lot of labor and equipment, they're able to recover a higher percentage, much higher percentage, but still not as high as everyone would like, but still very good. So how does Gypsum Wallboard arrive at their facility? Mostly by roll-off truckloads, as you see on the left. We've got that particular one is mostly drywall, which is good. And it goes over to the area on the right in the picture. And what their process is, loads that are highly wallboard, that would be 70% plus wallboard percent, they put in a pile over there. But as you can see from the photo there, it's got a lot of other stuff in there that's going to have to be removed. And then for loads that have less than 70% wallboard, they process it just as just for their C&D operation. And it goes over on the right-hand side for a loader that puts it into a finger screen. It screens fines out from the bulkier material. It goes up onto the upper level there where we have hand picking of the recoverable material, a lot of wood, metal, and other items. And it's very difficult to remove mixed loads because in that mixture, as it goes over a finger screen, a lot of that, any wallboard that might be in there breaks, it gets broken into small pieces and ends up in its fines. And when it goes into the fines, it's contaminating them and it limits the end markets for those fines. Many of the landfills don't accept contaminated fines for disposal, but there are a few that do, and that's where some of them go. On this one, like I said before, they only sort loads that have more than the 30% gypsum, and they encourage customers to pre-sort their loads and use a lead program. And then if they're short on sorters, and they don't have, the sorters here are on the floor, really a tough job to hand pick stuff out. And if they're short on sorters, they have to focus on the money generating material up on the platform that I showed in the previous slide. So it's an economic burden for them because likewise, after they separate it out, this recoverable material has a cost to it to get up to a recycling facility, and they go to the same USA Gypsum facility in Pennsylvania as we do. And again, their main operation is trying to recover wood and metal and other things that have value. And so it's less desirable. And then Revolution Recovery, like I said, their best end market is USA Gypsum up in Pennsylvania. They're constantly looking for end use disposal markets for the fines. And some end uses can be used as a landfill capping material or a fill material, as long as it's confined within itself so that it's not exposed to moisture and organics and bacteria. It might be suitable for that, and it's on a case-by-case basis. Disposals to out-of-state landfills with the fines mixed with all the other residuals is another method that they've found not as desirable, obviously, but that's what the current market shows they have to do. And then we get down to recommendations. How can we be better at this? Well, here's a few suggestions. First is to require wallboard manufacturers to have a minimum percentage of recycled content in their wallboard. Another would be to require all new building construction to collect scrap clean wallboard separately and direct it to a recycling outlet. A third option, regardless, is to improve the infrastructure. We could use more transfer stations, or the existing transfer stations need to expand their floor space so that you could receive and sort the stuff. Likewise, C&D processing centers. There aren't that many in our region, and problem with that is the transportation to get to a processing center is very expensive. Then a third is gypsum wallboard processing centers. Delaware is a small state, so it's no surprise we have to go out of state to find a gypsum wallboard processing center, just because of the volume that's needed to support something like that. Another is to establish more markets for gypsum. Gypsum could be replaced being virgin gypsum in making new wallboard. The recovered gypsum could also be used to replace virgin gypsum in cement manufacturing. And it could also be used as a soil amendment. And then lastly, the big one is establish extended producer responsibility laws in gypsum wallboard manufacturers. An issue with that too, of course, is that if you have individual states doing this, and we have interstate commerce going on, it's tough. Something like that, in my opinion, would be better if we could do regional or national things so that everybody would have a level playing field. And then I've got some references. Actually, I have to credit Mike Elliott, who's a C&D program coordinator at the Mass DEP, for showing that we've got some really good references. One is an EPA document, although it's a little old, 2014. It has a really good source of information regarding hydrogen sulfide and how they are compounding emissions at our landfills. Another is the Construction Demolition Recycling Association. They have standard specifications for the production of recycled gypsum from scrap gypsum drywall. And then lastly, NEMOA is a policy options white paper that's a good source of information regarding this subject. And it's a little old, September 2010, but it is a good source of information. And I would encourage people who are interested in the topic to look it up. And that's my presentation, and I'm ready for any questions people may have.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rick. And yes, like I said in the beginning, NEMOA has been focused on C&D for quite a while, and gypsum wallboard has been a problem material for quite a while. So we do have a few questions. One is sort of a fundamental one. If you could talk a little bit more about clean, like what do you mean by clean, and what other kinds of gypsum wallboard are there?
Right. Yeah, this clean is just what it sounds like. It has nothing on it. It hasn't been used. So clean wallboard is from construction. So as a new home is being built and they're installing the drywall, they cut pieces of it to put up, and it's these scrap pieces that are clean that will come to us. The other, like if you're doing a renovation and you're taking down wallboard, pretty much that gets into little pieces, and it's got paint and wallpaper on it, and those are, not desirable and not really recyclable. So the demolition part of C&D, that's really at present not recoverable for use in recycling, unfortunately, not at the moment.
All right, and the clean is about how much of the overall amount of wallboard? Or I guess Terry Weaver's probably going to give us that information in a bit.
Well, actually, I think that would depend by region. Like for instance, Sussex County, the southern part of Delaware, has got a housing building boom. So you'll see a lot of more construction and not as much. You have some demolition, but the ratio might be higher for construction down there. In the northern part of Delaware, you got a lot of renovation. So you might have about a 50-50 of clean versus a dirty. So it depends on the activity and the area that you're collecting, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, there's actually a bunch of questions have come through, so some of them we'll take
Yeah.
at the end. But the C&D characterization study that you mentioned, is that available on your website somewhere, or how did someone get a hold of that? They're
Yes,
interested
go
in.
to dswa.com. It's a report that's on our website. Yes.
Okay. And then if you could just talk quickly again, somebody or some folks are confused about, gypsum wallboard. It's in our houses, so how can it be toxic? So can you just talk a little bit about what makes
Oh,
it,
sure.
once it becomes a waste material? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the household, it's, up on your walls, and nothing's touching it. It's not getting wet. It doesn't have food waste and bacteria on it. That's the real reason. You have to have moisture. You have to have organic material and bacteria, and those act together to decompose.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you. I think I'm going to switch over now to the next presenter, and we'll try to deal with some of these other questions that have come in more closer to the end.
Sure.
So, great. Well, thank you so much, Rick, and we'll see you again at the end.
Okay, thanks.
So our next presenter is Mark VanWeelden. He is the area asset manager for Covanta in the Northeast. Covanta is the largest, oops, where did everything go? Oh. Covanta is the largest energy, waste to energy company in the US with over 30 facilities. And they're also operating in Europe. Mark has over 30 years of waste experience from growing up around a family waste hauling business. And then he owned his own waste hauling company. Then he moved over and had extensive leadership positions with Republic Services, Interstate Waste, and Advanced Disposal prior to joining Covanta. For the last 8 years, he's held several leadership positions at Covanta, including oversight of the Indianapolis and also the New York facilities. So with that, I will shut off my camera and let Mark get going. Thank you, Mark.
Well, thank you. It makes me sound a little old. I'm not that old, but thank you very much. I want to talk to you just a little bit briefly today on the problems that we have with gypsum wallboard in the waste for energy from waste. But briefly, I want to talk to you just a little bit about Covanta. We have over 50 facilities, and with some recent acquisitions that's a little dated, we're closer to 60 sustainable material processing facilities, as well as energy from waste facilities. 21 million tons of waste. That's a little bit dated as well. We're closer to 22 million annual capacity processing. And of course, electrical generation as an offset of that, 10 million megawatt hours. What people tend to not know is how many tons we actually recycle of metal. And at an annual average, it's over 600,000 tons as a company. We're very proud of that. And we're just over 4,000 employees now. We're highly focused on improving sustainability and encouraging the circular economy. This is the sustainable management, materials management, showing the US EPA and the EU as ranked the most environmentally sound strategies for municipal solid waste. Source reduction, of course, which includes the reuse. And the most preferred method following recycling is energy recovery. And lastly, treatment followed by landfill disposal. As Rick had alluded on the last presentation, the landfill disposal is still in many ways preferred in the US. We'll see that in just a moment. The two choices for disposal is landfill, as Rick had pointed out in the previous presentation. However, they are a major source of man-made methane. Methane is 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide. They do have leachate, as Rick had talked about, and there's possibility of groundwater contamination can occur in older landfills. Not sustainable use of the land, and the power production, even though there is a gas power production component, it's far less than the waste to energy, which can take 1 ton of MSW and reduce it by up to 90%. It's a clean base load of power generation, and again, we recover metals. And what's not on here, oddly enough, we actually recover money, coins, and those coins we're not allowed to resell those. They actually go back to the Federal Reserve through reverse auctions when available. So the U.S., how do we rank in terms of what we do with our disposal? And this includes C&D. The U.S. primarily landfill. The EU average, you see the energy from waste and the recycling components eating into that preferred method of landfilling that the U.S. has. Denmark and Germany, as a percentage, overwhelmingly energy from waste, and that's driven through public policy in a lot of ways. But again, the U.S., we still have a lot of land out there, and landfill is preferred in a lot of ways. Focusing just on the Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, we have 2 state line facilities, our facility in Haverhill and our facility in CMAS. Haverhill is a mass burn facility, and CMAS is an RDF, a derived fuel. So CMAS is larger, has more units, more generating power, but CMAS in particular, the difference between the two is they make a chipped, shredded fuel that goes into the boilers, where Haverhill, the solid waste is actually separated on the floor and then batch fed into the facility. Transfer stations support a lot of our as feeders to our facilities. We've got over 1.8 million processed tons annually. 900,000 of those enter through our transfer stations and then are redirected. And as it relates to the subject matter that we're here to talk about, it's interesting to know that we do not accept C&D at any of our facilities, with the exception of our Holston transfer station. And like Rick had said, there's not a lot of places to take that. So our Holston transfer station, we actually truck that out of state to a certified facility that will actually take that C&D and process it to their specifications. Other than that, we do not accept any C&D, any wallboard, and it's been banned for a number of years for the reasons to follow. What's the main problem that we have with gypsum wallboard specifically? First, it's the sulfur content that Rick had pointed out to. Creates SO2 emissions. In order to combat those SO2 emissions, we've got to increase our chemical reagent, in particular lime. There's also, this material does not, as Rick had showed in one of his photos, you see it's dusty when it's all broken up. It doesn't burn. Other than the paper on the outside, it doesn't burn. It gets crumbled up and becomes a particular matter for us, dust. All of that ends up in our ash and increases our ash cost. So it's a problem from the time it comes to us, which again, we do not accept it. However, the market conditions out there today as dilution is the solution, and where they can't get rid of it, somehow it comes to our facilities, even though we prohibit it. Sulfur content, SO2 emissions. Gypsum wallboard is mostly calcium sulfide mineral combined with thin paper coating, as Rick had alluded to. Sulfur in the wallboard directly increases our sulfur content in normal MSW trash. It actually adds to the sulfur content across the entire ton when mixed with MSW. Sulfur in the MSW converted to sulfur dioxide flue gas emissions when combined with the heat from the boiler. Increased SO2 emissions are a real problem for us. SO2 is a regulated US EPA criteria pollutant. The simplified MSW combustion, which isn't very simplified here, but it breaks down 1 part of gypsum board, 1.5 parts oxygen, 2 parts of carbon, combined with the boiler heat and combustion equals 1 part sulfur dioxide, 1 part calcium carbonate, and 1 part carbon dioxide vapor with 0.5 parts of water vapor. Not very simplified, but that's the science behind it. This is, oh, sorry. So at all of our facilities, we have SEM systems, a continuous emission monitoring system. And this is a full year snapshot of our CMAS facility that does over 1.2 million tons of MSW annually. And this is tracked at an hourly concentration. And as you see here, and during our tracking, there's spikes. And every one of these spikes, we look back to see what we're refeeding, what we're reprocessing, what came in during that time frame. And oftentimes what we find is, again, not a clean load of gypsum, but we see heavy concentrations of pieces of gypsum, and more importantly, the powder, the middle between the paper, high concentrations of that, to where somehow that material came in and it was fed in large batches. It's not 100% contributed to wallboard, but it is a leading indicator that we're taking in material that could be associated with diluted MSW with wallboard and C&D components in it. The increased chemical reagent, lime, what do we use that for? You'll see here that through the spray dryer absorber, we use that to scrub sulfur dioxide and acid gases out. You'll see the red line, the flue gases going in, and at the top there's actually creating a lime slurry that is actually encapsulating the sulfur dioxide and other acid gases and falling to the bottom, and is going to be collected into our ash system. From there, the flue gas goes to our bag houses at our facilities. I'll show you that here. This is a typical of what a bag house looks like. And these are just large steel framed boxes with hundreds and hundreds of large industrial, I'll call them vacuum cleaner bags, whereby the flue gas goes to the vacuum cleaner bags. Whatever particulate matter is in the flue gas gets stuck to the outside of the bag. The clean air with the flue gas without particulate matter goes through the inside and then back out through our stack. And all of that particulate matter that gets collected on the outside of these bags gets pulsated and vibrated and then fall to the hopper bottoms, and then gets conveyed out and is also collected with our ash. So we're creating ash to abate our environmental liabilities associated with wallboard. So again, here's a shot of our increased, of our ash loads. Gypsum wallboard directly adds increased ash generation, as most of it does not combust. Gypsum wallboard also increases the use of chemical reagent that we spoke about, and ash requires off-site landfill disposal. There's a tip fee and a transportation cost. There's also a long-term liability cost associated with ash disposal. So what do we do about it? Promote C&D recycling diversions and facility siting. We'd love to see more C&D facilities, processors in the Commonwealth or around the Commonwealth. Work to restore market balance in the C&D world. C&D processing and recycling should be cheaper than MSW processing. I think in Rick's slider, I thought it was very, very interesting that clean was almost free, if not free, versus mixed was expensive. So that's kind of, working to restore that market balance, I think makes sense. C&D, working with C&D generators, haulers, processing facilities, outreach, inspections. As you can imagine, we have daily, weekly, monthly inspections internally and externally, and yet we still see this waste coming to us. In many ways, it's coming with roll-off trucks, as Rick had indicated. But moreover, we're also seeing it in mixed loads of 100-yard transfer trailers, which is very, very hard to be able to catch that C&D, and in particular the wallboard, after it's already, down to 6-8 inch chunks, and then mix with 25 tons of trash. But we do it every day, and we will continue to do so, and hoping that there'll be more solutions along this notion of having more places to go that are hopefully closer. And that's what I have for today. There we go.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much, Mark. I am not seeing any questions specific to waste to energy here. So does anybody have any questions more about what happens at waste to energy facilities? So basically, you all don't want it. You say it's not allowed, but it still comes in, and because it's mixed in with other stuff, and it's a lot of, with demolition and with renovation projects, and maybe even some of the new construction, it can get made into smaller pieces. It doesn't come as a big board that you can easily identify. So
please don't bring it.
So let's see, here's a specific question. Do you try to go back and actually, when you see a spike, figure out, where that waste came from, and then get on those people to not do that again? Or does...
So I would say when we can, and when we notice that in real time. I mean, we actually have cameras and we can go back and re-record. We'll look at the actual pit or the floor volume to kind of look and see if the material has substantially changed. And then if we know, based upon that location and where that waste was that day, we can go back through the cameras and look. As well as every one of our operators are always watching and inspecting, as well as we have floor inspections too. So when we can go back and re-instruct our customers that this is material that we do not want. Oftentimes when we do, they say they didn't know it was in the roll-off or it was mixed in. And so, no one is bringing us, and I will tell you this, full loads of C&D. So they're not trying to bring it in, full loads, but sometimes they do come in mixed.
Okay. And there's just a couple of, if you could quickly talk more generally about waste to energy and just how energy is produced from trash, and then also about the ash disposal and sort of where, what kind of where does that go?
All right, I'll take the first part. Energy from waste. So basically, we produce steam. So the fuel is the solid waste, municipal solid waste. We will put that into boilers, produce steam called K-pounds. Those K-pounds go through a turbine, and those turbines produce megawatts. It's 24/7, 365 under normal operating conditions. So that's what the waste is used for. That's our fuel to make electricity derived from steam. And then the second part is our ash. That will go to either internal or external landfills. And it's the same landfill where your trash would go. Those are all Subtitle D, US EPA Subtitle D landfills, fully lined, and they're at the MSW level of containment. So we choose to only landfill our ash. No MSW.
I think there are some landfills that only take ash, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But they're also fully contained.
Fully contained, yes. Yeah. So when you build a monofill, it's the same US EPA regulations. It's the same permit as an MSW for ash as well. So we own and operate a few in the state that are 100% ash only.
Okay. One last question, quick, hopefully. So the gypsum that comes in, that you see coming in, do you think that's mainly from residential projects or in residential waste, or is it mainly from commercial waste, or, you know, what's the residential versus commercial?
I would say overwhelmingly it's the roll-off box that was doing a bathroom remodel or something along those lines that's coming in. The larger concentrations, when we do see them, have gone through a transfer station. So somehow a load came in there that was mixed, and then it was remixed again with MSW.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I think we'll now move on to hear from our next presenter, who is the facility that Rick mentioned in Pennsylvania. He's really the only player in town for us in the Northeast. So you're going to hear now from Terry Weaver. He is the president of USA Gypsum, which is located in Pennsylvania, as we've heard about. And let's see, I think I made, oh, there he is, great. So he's got over 30 years of experience in agricultural and construction industries. Mr. Weaver has served as president of an agricultural construction firm, as well as owning and operating farms in Pennsylvania. For the past 20 years, Mr. Weaver has focused on expanding gypsum drywall recycling and developing beneficial uses of the reclaimed gypsum. He is involved in several industry associations and currently is serving as the past president of the Construction and Demolition Recycling Association, the CDRA. They're a great organization that also has a focus on gypsum, and Terry will sort of talk about some of that. CDRA is a national organization which promotes and defends the environmentally sound recycling of construction and demolition waste. So with that, we will turn it over to Terry, and he'll tell us more about recycling wallboard and what economically is and isn't happening. So anyway, with that, I'm going to turn off. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Jennifer, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me for a few minutes to talk about drywall recycling in the Northeast. Jennifer, can everybody see my screen okay?
Thanks.
Are we good?
Yes,
Okay.
You are good.
Great. So as kind of the boots on the ground here in the Northeast, I'm going to talk about some of our experience, challenges, and what's happening from a recycler's perspective. And one of the things that we're always interested in is the gypsum supply. And so I'm going to talk for a minute about the gypsum supply in the United States. In 2020 versus 21, mined gypsum is up by 6%. Imported gypsum, which is also mined, is up by 8%. And synthetic gypsum produced from coal-fired electrical generation is down by 10%. So the total supply stayed stable, but within that, different segments have shifted. While the 2022 numbers haven't been issued yet, my sources say that mined has dropped and imported has increased. And some of the thinking behind that is that nearly everybody that owns a mine is trying to expand, but as you can imagine, the environmental challenges to mine expansion are difficult and time consuming. So the key takeaway from this, though, is that domestic supply of gypsum is down and imports are up. So how does that affect recycled gypsum, and what are the market drivers? I think the biggest market driver in the Northeast has been coal-fired energy production, or FGD gypsum. While it's been declining, it's still an important segment of production and supply to the Northeast. The next most important point is transportation to the market. So, where it's generated and where the demand is don't always match. And since gypsum is a heavy, kind of low value product, transportation is a huge component of the cost. And then finally, another thing that we see affecting the gypsum market on more on the drywall side is the waste disposal costs, I think, have gone up across the board in the Northeast. And there's a patchwork of regulations, some of them in place, others that are being implemented, and that all has an impact on gypsum recycling markets. So it's always interesting to try to figure out how much drywall scrap there is out there, and I could find various studies to support a wide variety of volumes that I wish to recommend as reality. But the CDRA did a deep dive with University of Florida back in 2014. And that estimate was 13.5 million tons of new and demolition drywall scrap. So if we jump back to a minute, whoops, I went the wrong way. If we jump back a minute and we look at that 42 million ton supply, 13.5 million tons of waste going into landfill could have a significant impact on that supply if it could be reclaimed. Let's talk about gypsum drywall volumes in the Northeast. I think the most reliable way to evaluate them is look at how much drywall is sold into the regions. The USGS combines New England and Mid-Atlantic together for the NMALA states, and Pennsylvania falls into that even though it's not a NMALA state. So combining the two, there's 3.23 million tons of new drywall that were sold into the New England Mid-Atlantic states in 2021. If we subtract Pennsylvania out, I think we're at about 2.58 million tons for the NMALA states. And if we use a 15% waste factor, that would come up to 387,000 tons of new drywall scraps that are generated from the NMALA states. So another important question is, well, how much demolition is there? And I'm not even going to project an estimate here because there's really not much reliable data. Some of that's because of how the waste is generated and handled. And there's just nothing out there, but I think it would be fairly safe to say that it would be at least equal to the amount of new drywall scrap that's being generated. So how did I come up with these different numbers? Well, I took the total amount that was shipped and I broke it down by population, and in that chart you can see how much that amounts to based on a population basis for each individual state, and then totaled that out. So there again, that's where the 387,000 came from, rounding my number to the far right in the bottom. And based on that, we pulled about 5,000 tons out of the NMALA states in 2022. So if my estimate is even close to being correct, we could be at a 1.3% recycling rate on the new drywall scraps being generated in the NMALA states. It's interesting to note that the NMALA 2010 study that was done, which is a great study, estimated the Northeast at 720,000 tons of new scrap being generated. And their method was using a waste characterization study and then spreading that out across all the C&D tons that were reported. So that was their methodology, and obviously you can see that it's nearly double the amount that that I think is a fairly reasonable estimate of the volume. So, you know, we hear a lot of talk about recycling going on, but we have to question how much is happening. And just a note is that if I use the same calculation and apply it to Pennsylvania right now, Pennsylvania is at about 18% for 2022. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, my screen froze here and I can't move. I may need to go out and come back in.
Well, or just try clicking on your slides and then maybe you can move them.
Yeah,
Oh, there we go.
thanks for your help.
Okay.
So what about the drywall outlets, drywall scrap outlets in New England or Numala states? We've been in business since 1998, although we weren't operating particularly in the northern states. We were probably over in the New Jersey early on, but we had Gypsum Recycling America open up in Boston back in, I believe, 2006, who couldn't make it work and exited the stage, unfortunately, back in 2010. We started pulling drywall out of the Numala states, you know, pretty aggressively around 2010. And I have a note here that Washington State on the West Coast, with a population of 7.9 million, recovered 54,980 tons back in 2018. And I know you might be wondering why I would mention Washington State when we're talking about Numala, but interestingly enough, Washington State has about the same population as Massachusetts and less than the combined Numala states. So the other interesting thing is that they haven't been compiling data since 2018, but industry sources tell me that drywall recycling there is alive and well. So what's happening to that 98.7%? It's going to disposal somehow. And if it's a processing center, good chance that most of it's going into process fines. In Massachusetts, for example, all C&D is required to go to a process center. And if it isn't picked up front, it's going to end up in the process fines, we call them, which sometimes are used as alternative daily cover, or they end up in the process residuals and get shipped to landfill. In the states where processing isn't required, some of it may go directly to a landfill, and truck, it's probably going to New York. By rail, there's a significant quantity going to C&D landfills in Ohio. So I was asked to talk about what I think, you know, what policy options there would be that would improve the recycling rate and kind of get things rolling again. I went back and reviewed the Numala 2010 white paper, and I recalled that it was a good paper, but I reviewed it again, and it really is a good paper. And they had five recommendations within that study. The first one was banning disposal. The second one was requiring recycling in state finance projects, and then required waste management planning, common terminology and reporting, and implementing extended producer responsibilities. So a few of those have been done by a few states, so it's a patchwork. We do have some bans for disposal. I could have put in parentheses behind that / enforcement. I'm not aware of any states that are requiring recycling on finance projects, but it's possible that I'm not aware of that. Requiring waste planning and management planning, I think that's a missing component. If we look at Washington State, they've tied permitting and having to post a bond and then return results on how much they recycled, and they combine that with a disposal ban, which they're pretty aggressive about enforcing, and that seems to have generated a better result. So after reviewing this again and thinking back that this has been now 12 some years, I had to bring up the little cartoon about, maybe we should start all over again. And so in some fashion, we're trying to do that. There's more interest now in recycling gypsum drywall than there has been in the past. So the CDRA agreed to set up a gypsum drywall recycling committee. And one of the first things we did was come up with this logo. And what it shows is all the moving parts that need to happen, starting from the inputs of water, recycled paper, and gypsum, the various sources. Then we have manufacturers, distributors, points of waste generation, which are deconstruction and construction, and then the recovery, sorting, and finally, hopefully, reincorporating it into recycled products. But unfortunately, much of it's still going to disposal. On the inner circle, I just want to double point out one of the most important parts to gypsum manufacturing, recycling, or gypsum supply in general is transportation, and that's a barrier that's difficult to overcome. So I'm proud to say that this group of stakeholders, and there's a variety of stakeholders. We have several of the manufacturers themselves, the Gypsum Association, some of the largest construction companies in the United States, the handful of us recyclers who are actively engaged are a part of it, and the CDRA contracted with the University of Florida to help us compile the information. We really take a deep dive into drywall recycling, and for anybody who has an interest, I would encourage you to look at CDRA for a copy of this report. So some of the things we deal with in this report are the new board types and volumes, what should and could be recycled. So the vast majority of drywall scrap is either regular or type X. That's readily recyclable in almost any market. However, there are specialty boards that amount to about 13.5%. And some of the concerns there are the antimicrobial ingredients and fiberglass facing and embedded mesh into some of the other specialty boards that take special consideration, both from a process and an end market standpoint. Then we really took a deep dive into demolition gypsum drywall, and really we don't like calling it demolition, we like calling it deconstruction, because when you say demolition, a lot of people envision a wrecking ball, and if you're going to successfully recycle drywall coming out of an old building, it's going to need to be deconstructed carefully. Some of the concerns are asbestos and joint compounds from years ago, lead-based paints. And then just generally, deconstruction drywall tends to have more contamination, meaning incidental foreign material contamination. And then if you're in the recycling business, you need to be sure that you understand your markets and the regulatory requirements that may limit some of the incorporation of gypsum recovered from deconstruction drywall. I'm not going to spend much time on this mixed C&D processing because Rick did a great job of describing this in more detail. But basically, if it comes in mixed loads, it's just very difficult to do a good job of pulling a high percentage of the drywall out. It gets crushed through the weathering outside, bringing it into pile mix, and then pushing it up. In the upper left corner, for those of you who have a screen and can see it, there's a track hoe you know, pucking through some drywall. There's a guy in a high-vis suit down there who's trying to help him pull drywall. And you need to have space, and you need to think about the labor and then the safety issues. You have very limited success in pulling enough drywall from a sort belt after it's been on the tip floor. I've had several people try it, and they just didn't have enough identifiable drywall up there to justify the labor and the space requirement that it took to pull it off the conveyor belt. So really, I think the whole industry agrees that source separation where the waste is generated is the best solution. And so in some cases, or in many cases actually, you know, you can set a separate dumpster there, and if you can monitor it and control the crews, you can put clean drywall in, take that to a transfer point, hopefully where it can be transferred for recycling. But as we get into some of the more urban settings where multiple dumpsters are just not feasible, we've seen people use what they call mini small carts in the picture in the upper left, and they've filled those with drywall as the drywall waste was generated, staged carts until they had a roll-off quantity staged, then had a roll-off container come in and fill that roll-off container quickly, or in some cases, even using packer trucks to transfer that source separated drywall to a transfer point. I think one of the reasons that Pennsylvania has a high recycling rate is there's been a strong adoption of specialty carts being used at the construction site. And so that material is source separated as it's generated, put into those carts. And those carts aren't emptied until they go to the transfer station or the C&D processor. These carts can be transferred in regular box trucks as opposed to waste trucks, which are cheaper and more efficient. And I think that system needs a wider adoption, especially in urban settings. And that would be an important part of increasing the drywall recycling percentage. So there's all that drywall out there, and there's a market. So if we did a good job of collecting it and recycling it, do we have markets? Well, the answer is yes, we do. The cement market's 4.4 million tons a year. The agricultural and miscellaneous is 15.5. And new drywall manufacturing is 22.8 million metric tons a year in 2021. So there's a market there. But some of the considerations you need to be thinking about as we look at these markets is, first of all, the big one being closed loop back into new drywall. We're doing some of that and have been successful at it. Some of the things that need to be considered is they're usually very sensitive to paper content. Particle size and moisture requirements may vary according to the facility and their mechanical feeders and storage capacities. They're going to be sensitive to specialty board that may be incorporated into it. You're going to need extensive analytical data. And the industry has generally not agreed or refuses to accept any material that may have been generated through demolition or deconstruction due to the sensitivity and the legal risk associated with asbestos. The industry has a historical issue there, with many of the manufacturers having gone through bankruptcy years ago. For agriculture and miscellaneous markets, they're actually varied. Some of it can be direct land application. It could be animal bedding. It could be for gardens, and understanding the different particle sizes, moisture requirements, analytical data that may be required. Some states regulate any kind of a waste going onto the soil very carefully. Almost all states require a license for any type of fertilizer material going on. And the agricultural markets tend to be very seasonal, which can be a challenge. So we have another important market, the cement and masonry. They also usually are very concerned about paper content. So we need to talk about doing a good job of removing paper from the gypsum drywall. Each plant may have different requirements for particle size and moisture that they need there, again, because of storage, feeders, and other mechanical limitations that might exist. And they're going to look very carefully at the analytics. Every drywall recycler who's separating the paper facing from that gypsum core, which is important, needs to have an outlet for that paper. So markets that we deal with are animal bedding, some composting, waste solidification. Over the years, we've done some ceiling tile incorporation and back into cellulose insulation. Some of the challenges or considerations are the acceptance of any farm material contamination is usually almost zero, so that needs to be a part of a process plan. The specialty board facing is going to be different, and if it was fiberglass, it's probably not acceptable in a fiber market. Then if you're dealing with demolition board or deconstruction board, you have to think about the paint and what that may do to the analytics. And then every market usually has some idea of an ideal particle size. So why can't we make this happen? Why isn't it happening? Well, any manufacturer out there that is going to agree to use the material is probably going to want a steady volume. He's going to want consistent material. And if we're talking about back into new drywall, typical plant uses 500,000 tons per year. So if I approach them and say, well, I have 5,000, they're probably not going to be too interested in making changes to their system to accommodate 5,000 tons of gypsum a year. Cement plant is typically around 45,000 tons. And there too, most of them are going to want to blend recycle with other sources. And so they're going to be concerned about having a regular supply. And then agriculture, we deal with lots of farmers who generally take smaller quantities, and so it's easier to fulfill their needs, but they are seasonal, as I mentioned before. So that was a deep dive that CDRA took into recycling drywall, and there's lots of information, almost 50 pages, including requirements for analyticals and all that sort of thing. We hope that'll help to move drywall recycling forward, not just in the Northeast, but across the United States. And so I'm excited to see what the next decade brings. We're here and we're able to recycle what the industry is able to collect and send us. So thank you. That's my presentation.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Terry. And I think you're a little modest as to, I think part of the reason why Pennsylvania has a higher recycling rate is because you're there and all the work that you're doing. So, so that's great. So there are some questions that have come in. So people are wondering why some demolition and renovation wallboard is not recyclable, because it's not everything is so old that it would have asbestos or lead paint. You know, a lot of renovation and demolition happens on things that are newer than that. Or could people do some testing and then still send the material for recycling?
So there are several questions within that question, and I'll try to address them. So
Do you want to put your camera on, Terry? You want to put your camera on?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. You don't have to.
I think it's coming on. It's on its way.
Okay, there you are.
There we are. So first of all, and in a scenario that we have now where our permit from the state of Pennsylvania only allows us to recycle new gypsum drywall scrap. So that's the first basis. And their concerns are most of the concerns that we've really talked about. So if I introduce deconstruction, if I encourage the state to allow me to introduce deconstruction into my mix of raw material, the first thing I'm going to have to think about is the paint on that paper, even if it's not lead-based. If that's going into animal bedding or compost or any other product that is going to somehow at some time end up in the soil, we need to be thinking about that pretty seriously. So I think in our case, the solution will probably end up being a separate facility that could take in either deconstruction or demolition, and those paper markets then would either have to be landfill or to maybe waste solidification where it ends up in a landfill. You have the same situation really if you're going to process fiberglass-based material. If that ends up in your fiber, obviously, or in your paper, that can't be in compost or in any other scenario that would end up in the soil. So that's a kind of a quick answer to a complex situation, and that's assuming that you could confirm that the drywall was newer, which means having to be able to trace it to its source.
Okay. All right. And then I think we just have another minute here. So before we move on to our last presenter, but the reports from CDRA, the University of Florida study, and the best management practices document, are those available? Like, where can people find those?
So they're available in full to all members and will be on the website soon. If you're not a member of the CDRA, we hope you'll become one. But if you're not and aren't interested, just contact, I think you're a member, Jennifer, or myself, someone who is a member, and they'll be able to obtain it for you.
Actually, I don't think NMO is officially a member, but we're friendly with them.
That's too bad.
So, okay, because I think some folks, particularly policy thinkers in other states would, looking for data and information. So I think that would be great. All right, well, I think we'll have Terry on back at the end for some more discussion, but I think we'll move on to our last presenter, who is Michael McCamley. He is with New West Gypsum Recycling, and you'll hear a little bit more about them in a minute from him. He's in Canada, and New West Gypsum Recycling was founded in 1985 by Michael's parents, who pioneered the recycling of post-consumer gypsum waste back to wallboard manufacturers for them to use in making new board. So that was closing the loop. So Michael is the second generation recycler who grew up in the business. In his 27 years of experience, he has literally worked every position possible at the recycling facility and in the business. He's lived in Europe for 8 years to help establish new operations in France, Belgium, and the UK. And in 2018, he spent several months in Norway during the startup of their operation there. So he currently sits on the board of directors and engages with all levels of stakeholders to make gypsum recycling viable in almost any market. But he will also tell us a little bit about why it's not necessarily happening here. So with that, I will turn myself off, and Michael, you can get started.
All right, thank you very much, Jennifer. And also thank you to NMO for the opportunity to present today. My presentation is about gypsum recycling, but you got to view it more as urban mining. If you really want to get the material out of the market. This is just a bit quick history about New Gypsum Recycling. We are founded in Canada. It's a family-owned business. 37 years of drywall experience. We have 20 years of international experience. Between all our facilities, we have a global capacity of 800,000 tons, and to date, we've recycled 6 million tons back to manufacture. We have our own patented process, proprietary equipment, and we have 8 facilities across North America, Canada, and Europe. This is basically all the places that we're based. And I just want to point to our slogan, positive affecting where we live. Wherever we go, we want to make an impact. And one way of doing that is to be able to recycle wallboard. Basically, how do we do that? Basically, drywall recycling is just separating the paper from the gypsum core so that it can be used in new manufacture of drywall. We tend to offer like a transfer station, so we have a tipping fee as our primary source of revenue, and the tipping fee varies from location to location because there's many factors that goes into determining what that is. Typically, when we go into new areas, we don't offer a bin service because we want to work with all the local waste companies to be able to throw out the biggest net that we can to be able to capture as much drywall as possible. We are a processor, not a waste management company. We typically work directly with manufacturers to be able to process all the gypsum waste that they need to be able to meet their demands, and in turn that we're able to take it from the market to be able to help them offset some of their costs if they have high rock costs, or maybe they want to offset some of their waste costs. They're able to do that. We fabricate our own equipment. We meet all the world technical market safety standards, but we do not sell our equipment. We are basically a service-based company. We do provide turnkey solutions and developing agreements with all the different scrap suppliers, different supply agreements with end users, whether it's what Terry alluded to earlier, if it's manufacturer, cement, agricultural. We basically do that on a case-by-case basis because we honestly believe that gypsum wallboard should always remain closed loop, and we help business operators meet their local requirements, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Some of this has been touched on before. There's many sources of gypsum rock. It can come from mines locally, but more often than not, they're from overseas, like the Middle East. A lot of the rock, I believe, coming in to North America is coming from either Nova Scotia or Spain, just because the manufacturers need to be able to source the material well out in advance, and sometimes it takes the permitting process to open new mines or expand mines. It can be a very lengthy process. Then there's costs, right? It is a commodity at the end of the day, so you need to price your recycle against whatever other commodities are in the market. And the big hurdle is always going to be transport. Farther you have to go, more expensive it's going to get. Fuel prices are rising, so it's harder to be able to collect it just through the sheer cost of transportation. So quantities vary with the purity, and non-gypsum constitutes basically that the natural gypsum may have like clay or other heavy minerals. Synthetic gypsum from coal-fired power plants may have more heavy metals, but it's a cheaper material for the manufacturers that they can use synthetic gypsum. For one, they don't have to transport as far, and it's a byproduct from coal-fired power. So, and it's a good alternative because this material would be landfilled if the wallboard industry didn't use it. But it's also in direct competition with recycle because there's so much of synthetic gypsum. It's hard to use recycle because a lot of times they're in a take or pay scenario where if they're going to have to use 1 ton of recycle, they may have to landfill 1 ton of synthetic gypsum. So it's all a balancing act for the manufacturers to be able to find the best cost point to be able to bring a board to the market that's not overpriced. Then you just got to look at recycling. Like for us, for its closed loop recycling, that's an increased source of recovery. The material will stay in the supply chain. Then you're less of burden to go mine or source other quantities of gypsum. Costs, right? Costs are increasing, but gypsum is increasing at a lesser rate than other sources. And then as naturally quality is a continued improvement because there's lots of different things that can affect the quality of your recycle, whether it's made like if it's, I'm going to break into 2 categories that we have: dated material, which is normally considered 1990 or newer, then non-dated material, which is 1990 or older. And typically with the non-dated stuff, then you can have risk of asbestos, lead, and other impurities. And once it's newer, then you run into less the chance of crossing those hazardous materials. Now, this is our collection method. Typically that we do process the manufacturer scrap. Typically when they start a line, that they'll generate what's called wet waste. This is like the very beginning of their line when they're basically sandwiching the gypsum between the 2 bits of paper. There's always a little bit of that's going to end up as waste. So we're able to process this very wet material. Then occasionally we'll get stacks of board that may have been damaged in the warehouse or product that has not met the proper specification to be sold. So we would also process these materials, but the vast majority that we process actually comes from the public. The public for us is a lot of the actual board applicators themselves. Typically, if we're going to get material from a transfer station, we actually require them to actually segregate that on another part of their site so there can't be a risk of any cross contamination. Essentially, they're just a bulking transfer station. And we also do get the everyday people. You know, sometimes people come down with a small little cardboard box that's been sitting in their garage for years. They're able to bring it to us for recycling. So then it comes to us, then basically 95% of our product will go to the manufacturer. We do serve other industries, but our focus is truly on the manufacturer. Then we got, you know, other miscellaneous like metal and scrap. But we educate our customers to bring us really clean drywall, because if they don't, and in some cases, I will impose a fee on them if it's not clean. So there's an incentive there for them to bring me clean drywall. and about 5% of that is paper waste. Typically, this can go back to a pulp mill. It is technically recyclable, but the paper quality is very low. The fibers are very short, so it's not a very attractive product or material for the paper industry. And there's only one grade of paper that I know that's worse than gypsum paper, and that's eggshell cartons. Some of the drivers, like basically, we were born from a landfill ban, British Columbia, Mitch Vancouver, back in 1984, banned drywall from their landfills because it was creating too much hydrogen sulfate gases. And at the time, my family was in the demolition business. So we transitioned from a waste company to being a recycler. So there's opportunity when you create bans. But if you're gonna put a ban in place, it really needs to be thought out, and you need to include all the stakeholders in on the decision making. Massachusetts has a partial ban. This is great because it's focusing on the material that definitely can be recycled, and it was known as clean gypsum board, which is the offcuts, non-painted material. And then typically you can flip that board over and it'll have a date stamp on the back, so the recycler will know when that board is made. Over the years, there's been a very a lot of work done towards legislation, especially in the EU. So they're basically have narrowed their definition of waste. So each member state now can look to this criteria and be able to use what is now best practice. And then Germany has their own, like each member state does their own thing, and the European Union is more or less like a guideline. It's kind of like, you know, state and federal level, or province and federal level. So in Germany, they have what's considered an useful use or alignment. So if it's not bringing any detriment to what they want to use it for, they will allow it, long as it's in alignment with everything else. So if they're going to take it and export it to another country, they may not allow it because it'll throw the rest of the market out of alignment, because the wallboard manufacturers want to use it. All the stakeholders there want to work together. Now in Canada, Ontario has regulations, and basically gypsum is considered non-hazardous or non-corrosive. So it allows for more opportunities to be able to do something with it there. For example, we can use our paper as animal bedding because it's non-corrosive, as long as it's free from other debris. But typically that would be for the farmer to tell you, he'll tell you, I'm seeing too much plastic, I'm seeing too much wood. Why is there yellow flakes of paper, which is actually, or purple, because those are the fiberglass facings, which are becoming more popular. So they stopped putting drywall only on the inside of buildings. Now they're putting on the exterior of buildings. So that's complicating things a little bit more for the recycler to be able to deal with our paper. Now you get into your disposal options. Is it going to be mixed C&D versus source separation? I think some of the earlier presentations did a good job to highlight this, but for me as a recycler, mixed C&D is far less attractive because source separated material, I can do more with it, right? So if I'm gonna have to pick between the streams, like if I can only do X volume per year, I'm gonna do source separation because it costs me a lot less headaches, and it's actually cheaper to be able to process a single stream. Then if you do mixed C&D, then you're gonna have more asbestos testing. because you need to be able to guarantee for your end suppliers that it's not there. Then you may need more staff because you're pulling out more material out of the gypsum. So for recycler source separation is the only way to go. Then for the recycle, you gotta look at the cost and availability of the gypsum supply in the market. And Terry's presentation did a good job of explaining this. It's all about supply and demand, right? So you gotta see if there's any demand in the market, then you can go find the supply. Recycling is counterintuitive, but you need to know where you're going to go before you can even start. So let's talk a little about processing. Basically, we receive loads. We use our loaders to be able to break it up a little bit. We put it in a feed hopper. We have only one. He's not like he's there only to inspect the belt. So if there's any contamination that's on the belt, you should be able to pull it off, because our loads are clean to start out with because we've educated our customers. So I don't need 5 to 6 guys on the sorting belt pulling off wood, metal. I just need one guy just to inspect it, just make sure that nothing will go into my system that will hurt it, like concrete, for example. So it's there. So my inspector is there to more or less to protect my equipment more than anything else. Okay, now I've touched on this, right? You need a clean source of gypsum, right? A lot of times there might be tile on the board, or there might be some metal flashings on it, right? So you need to take care to remove all that. And also you need to have inspectors for asbestos contamination, especially here in BC, because our work authority actually requires us to ask for a lab result for a negative test before we're actually allowed to accept it. So this is why we have dated and non-dated material. If it's non-dated, we're going to ask for the lab result. Then if it comes back negative, we'll take it. And if it's positive, then we don't even accept it. They need to go to an abatement company to have that material dealt with. Our processing equipment, it doesn't matter how wet it is, because we develop equipment that can really handle wet material, because a lot of times when gypsum is source separated, it's sitting out in containers. Sometimes it's sitting in the rain. Sometimes if it's on someone's site, it's not covered. And also we need the ability to process manufacturer waste. Gypsum is a bulky material, so you are going to need space to actually store it. You're needing stuff for your incoming. You need space for your recycle. You need space for your paper. And you also need space for trucks to be able to turn on and offload. So those are all things to consider if you're going to start recycling. Yeah. Some of the outputs, talked about this earlier, supply and demand. Don't take in more than you can handle, right? Because you may create a bit of a blockage along the line, like you take in too much material and you don't have enough outflow, then you have to tell your customer, sorry, I have to stop. Then that disrupts the market, then they may go take it elsewhere. So you really need to manage your incoming and outgoing flows. At some of my facilities, I actually have kind of schedule, and they schedule an hour and a time when they can come in, because I only have the capacity to process so much. Knowledge, like you need to know what's in your market. Like you need to know like who are manufacturers selling into the market because there might be certain additives in their boards, right? Like how old are the homes in your market, or were they built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s? So that gives you some knowledge if there's anything hazardous that you may have to deal with, right? So you really need to go look at your market and to really know as much as you can before you start. Product and quality control. Typically, this is met by most of the manufacturer customers. Am I running over time, Jennifer?
You just have a couple more minutes, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm almost at the end.
Well, I don't know about that, but all the slides will be available. He has a lot of good points, but go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. Okay, now, when you're making recycle, the manufacturer is going to have their specifications, so you got to do everything you can to meet that, like quality content, particle distribution, paper quality, right? This is our first set of equipment back in 1985, powered by a tractor PTO, and this is our standard set of equipment today, where we're able to make any particle size which a manufacturer may need in this plant space in Germany. Waste hierarchy. Everyone here should be more or less familiar with this. Avoidance, resource recovery. It's about putting it in the best home possible, right? We are a closed loop recycler. Now, downcycling or beneficial use, it'll never be gypsum again. Now, these are some of the economic issues, which I've already kind of touched on, right? So a lot of this here, and in my 27 years and almost 35 years in the company, there's a lot of information, right? But this is what we need to do to achieve recycling success. Now, if you're government, you need to look at everything that's on this slide, right? From your policies to developing standards, a level playing field with enforced regulations. What's the point in putting in rules if you're not going to enforce them? Providing incentives for recycling practices, environmental focus over the industrial lobby. This is like environmental versus capital, and you need to de-risk the use of recycling materials. Build in some criteria where it gives the manufacturer some leeway if they do happen to have an exposure, and never go for less than green. For the industry hydraulic manufacturers, recognize that it's urban mining. Design products that are able to handle high quality recycled material. Share responsibility and stir the waste arising from your products. External producer responsibility. And develop green procurement policies in particular in support of new recycling facilities, never go less for green. So all the stakeholders need to work together. And to all the customers, right? You need to collaborate with all the waste companies. You need to embrace that culture of the circular economy, because gypsum is the poster child when it comes to the circular economy. And you have an opportunity to be leaders in this market, and we have the responsibility to help establish green procurement policies and support manufacturers for use of recycling in the end market. And finally, the waste companies. You just got to get it out of your waste streams, right, at the end of the day, because it needs to be source separated. And we just have to do it. And this is my contact information. So thank you, everyone. And hopefully I gave you a little bit of knowledge. But to be honest, If you want to ask me a few questions, just feel free to send me an email and I'll help to clarify.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Michael. We do have some questions that have come in that I think anybody can, if the other folks can put their cameras on as well. And not sure how to do this where we don't have anybody, we're not looking at anybody's screen. I don't know how to do that. Let's see. How about if I just don't show my screen?
You did
Or
it.
does that work?
Yes.
Okay, great. So one thing that I think not everybody that's in the business doesn't already know is about the coal-fired power plants, and FGD is flue gas desulfurization. So gypsum, somehow or another in the chemistry, and maybe one of you can speak to this a little more, in the chemistry of treating the off gases from a coal-fired power plant, it generates synthetic gypsum. So that was a source of gypsum for sort of recycling into wallboard, but we don't have very many coal-fired power plants, at least in the Northeast now. Anyway, does someone want to comment a little bit more about what this synthetic gypsum and how the coal-fired power plants play into this? Or don't as much anymore.
Come on, Terry.
Yeah, Terry.
Okay, so while there is significantly less coal-fired power generation than there was 5 years ago, in my part of the country, being Pennsylvania and Maryland, we still have a significant amount of electric generation from coal. And I think the plants that are remaining now are going to be there for some time. The plants that have closed tend to be ones that were old and weren't up to date in their emissions control. The ones who have the best emissions controls are going to take some time to displace. The ones with the best emissions controls are the ones that generate the flue gas desulfurization gypsum. So as part of their emissions capture, they inject liquid lime into their stacks, which bonds to the sulfur, and gypsum is calcium sulfate. And so it's much more complex than that simple explanation, but they actually generate gypsum that is very pure and consistent in most cases. It'll vary a bit from plant to plant, and if they change their source of coal, that can also change because there's high sulfur coal and low sulfur coal and so forth. But so there is going to be a limited amount available for the foreseeable future in this area, and it just so happens that we have let's see, there's 4 drywall recycling plants in the Neumoa region, so they tend to be north farther, and I'm not aware if any of them are using FGD at this point. They may be blending some, but in Pennsylvania, we saw a fair amount of FGD being used for new drywall and also out of Maryland. So it won't be displaced entirely for probably 10 years.
Okay. So earlier on, this is more for Rick from the beginning, I think, the people were questioning about the C&D, sort of the residuals and the fines from C&D collection and where those go and what the issues are with those. And you mentioned that there's a C&D recycler, but does your landfill take their fines, or like what do they do with their fines?
Very interesting point, because we're not interested in their fines, right? And so we have an agreement with Revolution Recovery that they can go ahead and find another place to take it, out of state, basically. So that's what happens. and their residuals end up out of state also, again, because our landfill's not interested in that material
And why is that?
because of the sulfur content. Quite frankly, that's it. And so that is like other sulfur containing waste. We have special waste policy where if we have knowledge that a waste coming to us has a high sulfur content, there's a limit, and we on a case by case basis can refuse any special waste that has high sulfur. But as a public entity, a public authority, we have to factor other things like that. For instance, in southern Delaware, there's a lot of chicken farms. And if the avian flu hits them, and if they have no other alternative, we've accepted thousands of dead chickens in a batch, and they have a lot of sulfur content. And if you don't handle it properly and quickly, it's a real issue. So as a public service, we have in the past handled loads of those, but we of course encourage on-site treatment or composting of dead chickens on site. But anyways, yeah, that's just a unique situation for us.
Okay, so another question that comes in that I guess anybody can answer is, here in the US, sometimes there's just a lot of C&D goes on rail cars off to a landfill. It's not that expensive. So how do we incentivize people to do more C&D recycling and to recover the wallboard and do that? Like how can we get people more interested in it?
I can take a stab at that question. Basically, it's waste companies' business. Landfills are in the business to fill a hole and in the ground at the end of the day. But they can be restricted to what they take in. So if gypsum is deemed to be a useful material, then governments can go in saying that, okay, well, if you're going to send gypsum over, we're going to charge you a green eco fee. This is this is the tactic that they use in some European countries when they're going to export a very useful product or waste over a line. They're just going to put some kind of duty on it. So if you're going to move material around that's perfectly recyclable in a local market, they should pay to take it out of the market. So I'm not an economist or anything like that, but it's basically economics versus the environment. So we got to put the environment before the economics. That's just the honest truth of it.
Right. So Michael, I guess maybe you could comment a little bit about why you don't operate in the United States, or why you did and now you don't.
Yeah, typically it's first of all, you need a willing manufacturer, and secondly, you need to be able to be competitive with the landfills. So in the case of Washington State, it's the only state that we've ever operated in. Unfortunately, we had to exit that state some years back due to other reasons. But we're able to compete because at the end of the day, people do want to do the right thing. They want to be able to go to their customers and maybe their lead project. And a lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong, but most government buildings down in the States need a silver certification to be even built. So that means that gypsum needs to get recycled. Now, sometimes that's a benefit in Terry's case, so he may get a lot of lead projects that need to be recycled, but they lose that credit because of the distance that they went. So by having a local recycler, you're able to get more lead points. And also what helped was the city of Seattle also had a 50% ban, so only like only clean drywall can go recycled, and anything that wasn't can go to landfill. So the economy was working together. You had a willing manufacturer, you had a willing government, you had a willing customer base, and you had a willing recycler. So that's the perfect scenario for the circular economy. But unfortunately, what drove us out is that sometimes that people look at, you know, all this recycling revenue and they want a piece of it. So I'm not going to say names or counties or anything like that, but they imposed an 18.4 gross utility tax. An 18.4 utility tax on gross revenue, right? So we had to close our doors. We had new competition coming in the market. We had an already pre-established supply agreement, so we couldn't go and say, hey, we need to increase our prices. We can't go to our customers. So in that case, we just decided to close our doors. But our largest operation is actually in British Columbia, so we're still able to service that market. But the ones that lose out are all the drywall applicators and all the waste handlers that had a place to take it, and they lost. So they had to go find other places to take it. And I know since we left, that void has been filled because it's an established recycling market. So to Terry's slide earlier, I'm not surprised he's getting 50,000 tons out of the market because we've done that in the past. Right?
Okay.
So there's some truth in it, but it goes back to this level playing field, right? Like taxes should not fall on deaf ears. If we say it's going to upset our business, we have to close. We need some way to, you know, work through that, and those kind of systems aren't in place, right? So it's a little bit is political. So we gotta work through it. But at the end of the day, gypsum wallboard is 100% recyclable, and that's the truth. And it does not need to go to landfill, period.
Right. Thank you so much. Those are good ending words, I think. So thank you, everybody that stuck with us here. And I just want to reiterate that this webinar was recorded, so it will get posted on the NERC website along with the slides from everybody today. And that we do have the part 2 of this, which is to talk about some potential solutions and getting the construction companies more involved with the source separation and trying to do the right thing, and getting that sector involved, and then also potential process to deal with some of the fines and some of the other demolition waste. And then also we'll hear from the gypsum wallboard manufacturers themselves, or the trade association, about, you know, their role and their thinking about, like Michael said, we should be closing the loop. It is a recyclable material. It should not be being disposed of. So, and with that, I just want to thank everybody today. This was really good, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And thank you so much to Rick and to Mark and to Terry and to Michael. Thank you.
You're welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day.